Welcome to the latest update on nowRail, and the big news is obviously nowRail is now at 1.3.0 and the big changes are all to do with the loco controller. So going over to the workbench, obviously we have a couple of controllers. There's a slight difference between the two. The one on the left is powered purely by this USB-C connector. This one on the right is different because it's got a switch on the top and is battery powered as well as USB charged. So same controller, but two different methods of powering them. Now externally they look pretty similar to the old controller. The main changes that have been made is there is now a separate settings screen, and this now deals with the clock. There is a TX all and RX all feature and the layout code that I'll go through in a moment. Going back to the main screen, the other change is that the consist button is now on the main screen just to make it faster to get to. So let's have a look at these changes in the settings. So the first change is a change that home users aren't really going to use, but was designed for clubs that are using the controllers. So if we go to the settings, you can see that I've got the layout code displaying on the screen. Now this is the code that you enter when you set nowRail up and is basically your layout code, and this stops your transmissions being sent to someone else's layout or their transmissions being sent to your layout. Now for most people they'll leave this as the default if it's a home layout, but obviously if you were taking some layouts to an exhibition or you're running your layouts at a club, you need your layouts to have separate codes to stop interference. So coming back to the webcam, the point of this here is that I am now able to just press on this and I can change the layout code to whatever I want and just exit. At this point it will now start transmitting on this new layout code. Now the point of all this was to allow clubs to create a number of controllers, but not having to have sort of spares for every layout. You can now have a couple of spares knocking around and you can change the layout code on the fly so that it can be used on any layout in the club's sort of inventory. Now one thing to be aware of with this feature, if I just unplug this one and plug it back in again, when I go to the settings, it will automatically default back to the layout code that is written in the initial sketch. So the code can be changed on the fly, but will always go back to its original code when restarted. Now the other big change, if we exit out of this, go back to the settings page again, you will see that we have a TX all and an RX all. Now, if we go back to change loco, it's always been possible to select a slot, select a loco, and transmit that to the other controller. As you can see, it's now sent the data over. The difference with the system that I'm using now is in the settings. If I go to the settings in this one, if I select the RX all on this second controller and click TX all on here, just press the button. Now you'll notice this one just flashes yellow very quickly. It's now transmitting over all of the loco data from this controller over to this controller. Now the point of this system was, if this was a temporary controller that's just been allocated to a layout, if I've got 40 or 50 locos put onto this controller, this is a quick way of sending all the data over to the second controller. Now the RX all light is going to stay on there for a bit until eventually everything has been transmitted across. Can't remember how long it takes. It's not very long. I think it's about a minute or so. So now after about sort of 45 seconds to a minute, you can see that the RX all light has gone out, and that means that all that data has been sent across. So now if I go to change loco and I exit this and go to change loco, you'll see that I have an identical set of locos listed on each controller. And this will go through, I haven't got many in the second lot, I did put some odd ones in, and this is just sent across all 200 slots. So if you had a lot of locos in the system, everything that gets sent across, and it just saves you having to type in the details or send them across one at a time. So those are the main, if you like, the software changes that have taken place. However, within these controllers, there is some hardware that has changed, and that is because I created a circuit board. So these are the two controllers with the lids off. As you can see, I've got the USB-C connector, and that is just one of these little connectors. There's a piece in the 3D print that allows this unit to be just clipped into place. You can then see that the circuit board mounts very nicely in the new case. The new case has less parts because the circuit board makes it a little bit easier. And it's just a case of putting some headers on. If I pull this board off, you can see that the main components are there. You've got the 10K resistor, the EEPROM, obviously the ESP32 sits in here, and this header here is one of these headers sort of upside down, and the screen is connecting directly into the back of the circuit board. So when everything is assembled correctly, it literally all plugs together. Now this one, if you look here where there is a red connector, there is a switch connector on the circuit board. This one doesn't have a switch because it's purely powered off the USB, so I've just put a connector across it, whereas this one is actually going to a switch, because when this is plugged in to this little connector here, this is being powered by a battery within here. This one I think was 3,700, the battery. I'll just quickly show you a picture of that in a minute. Other components here, this is a boost converter, so this boosts the voltage up to 5 volts because obviously the battery is 3.7. So I've got 5 volts coming in, charging the battery, coming out of the battery. If it's plugged in, obviously I'll get 5 volts straight to the board. Otherwise, if I unplug it, then I'll get the 3.7 volts coming into this unit, and that will be boosted to the 5 volts ready to be used. Now when it comes to the cases themselves, all you do to build them up, build up the circuit board, get the screen will locate into the front face correctly. You then screw the circuit board in with these little, through these holes here. They're using M2.5 screws, and they just literally cut their own thread into the case. And then I've got these M2.5 bolts that go the full length and screw into the back of the case, and that holds the whole thing together. So I now have 2 controllers for my layout. The one that's plugged in all the time is going to be the master one. The other controller will be a secondary one. I shall use that most of the time because it's going to be the battery powered one, but it just means that for the layout I've always got 2 controllers in case I drop one or break something. Right, let's have a look at the parts for these. So as always, just below the video, there is that link to the Digital Town nowRail page. So if you just click on that, you will come to this screen here. So once you're on the nowRail page, there's just some details. You can download the latest nowRail code, But also, if you're mainly interested in the controller, just click on the touchscreen loco controller. That'll bring you down to this section of the website, and you've got the old information, and this is the old information for if you are building this, if you like, by hand, soldering up your own circuit board. And once again, the case for this will still be available. That's going to be around, and you have the full circuit diagram. One thing, just as a reminder, the screen that I am using is an ILI 9486 with an FT6236 capacitive touchscreen, and there is a link here to the one that I bought. I got mine off AliExpress, and that is the one right there, 9486 FT6236. Be careful, because there are a lot of these screens that look very similar, but they are different. So that is the one that I used. Right, coming down then, we have the latest PCB version. If you want to get your own PCBs made, then you can download the PCB files. I got mine printed by, hang on, let's just find the email. Right, found it. It was a company called PCBWay, and they charged me about £8, including VAT and shipping, to get 5 boards to the UK. So you just download that, send them those files, and they'll make it, or send it to your own PCB manufacturer, whatever. There's no liability on these. Use them at your own risk. I haven't burnt my house down or blown anything up yet, and they seem to work fine. But again, I'm not an electronics circuit board designer or anything like that. I've just made these up myself. Right, other bits. If you want to download the make files for these, just looking for the link, you can click on this link here, and it will take you to the Colts 3D page, which is where you can download the files from. Now, the rest of the details about using the controller, not a lot has changed. So if you just watch the other couple of videos, it will show you how to use the controller, and then there was an update to the controller. Now, going back to the top of the screen, if you want to build your own controller, obviously I've built an example controller, but if you want to build your own, the new functions have been added to the loco controller functions. Just scrolling down to the bottom, there are 4 new functions. There is the set nowRail address. The address is in these 4 elements, so element 0, 1, 2, 3, and set your value. It's a value between 0 and 255, so you can change that element in real time to change your address. We've now got a get nowRail address, and this gives a string with those hexadecimal values that you saw on the controller, and again the example of how to do that. If you want to transmit between controllers, there is the loco TX all loco data, and literally that is the function that gets called when I press the 1 button. And then there is the opposite, the RX, which deals with receiving data, and depending on the state value depends whether the system is set to receive or not. Now, obviously those are quite complex functions and will mainly be used by those who are quite experienced at nowRail and are literally building their own controllers. And again, if you have any issues with those, just let me know, and I can always do some additional videos on using those functions. But the main point of today's video is just to show that the new controllers are out. Obviously you've got all the functions as before. It will actually do a full sort of 30 functions. You've got 200 locos that you can store in your loco array. As before, you can set consists, literally just click the locos that you want in the consist, and now that will run as a consist. If you want to clear the consist, just click clear, and that's the end of that one. And obviously we've got the power on, power off. Now with the nowRail system, the way this works, if you're running this with DCC-EX, clicking stop will do a full power off of DCC-EX. It will do, if you like, a full emergency stop. One of the issues we have discovered when you're running this with the NCE system, it only seems to stop the loco that you are actually controlling. And this is an issue even if you're using a power cab. That's exactly how the power cab works. It's not a fault with the nowRail system, it's actually something that's lacking within the cab bus. And if anyone has any solutions to it, please just let me know and we'll mod the code. So that's it really for today's update. nowRail 1.3.0 is out, and with it comes the new hand controller. As you can see, it's a pretty simple unit just to solder up the headers on, so very, very fast to build. I think I built the controller circuit in about sort of 25 minutes. So that's it for, if you like, this video today. What I'm going to do now is start doing some videos on using the nowRail system and how I'm integrating it into my own layout. So that's it for today. Hope that's been useful, and see you in the next video. And thanks again to all those who've been testing and sending in comments. Really appreciate it. Bye for now.